Welcome to the deep dive. You know, there's something undeniably primal about the wilderness, isn't there?
Absolutely, that sort of magnetic pull.
Yeah, that feeling of wanting to step off the path, you know, find that untouched beauty.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of us, I think right alongside that allure is this deep kind of unsettling apprehension.
Right. It's that isolation. It can be beautiful, but also vast.
Exactly. A place of profound isolation where the unknown really reigns supreme. And sometimes that unknown isn't just vast. It feels, well, deeply menacing.
It's true. We often romanticize the wild as this like sanctuary, right? A place of peace and escape.
Yeah.
But what happens when that untamed space, it turns hostile? When the silence isn't serene, but feels, I don't know, terrifyingly observant.
That's precisely what we're exploring today.
Yeah.
For you listening, we're going to journey into some truly unsettling real-life narratives, stories of mysterious and terrifying encounters in these really isolated natural spaces.
Yeah.
We've pulled from this collection of chilling, pretty raw accounts shared by people who claim to have experienced just inexplicable horrors.
And these aren't just campfire stories,
Yeah.
right? These are presented as like unfiltered glimpses into what happened.
Exactly. What can happen when the wilderness isn't just vast, but deeply, truly unsettling?
And these narratives, they really go beyond typical folklore.
Yeah.
They're framed as personal experiences that left this undeniable mark.
Right.
It forces you to consider that some parts of the wilderness might not just be uninhabited, but perhaps well occupied.
Yeah.
Maybe by something we don't fully understand, or something that operates entirely outside our usual ideas of safety.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We can start with the narrator who, by all accounts, seemed really comfortable in the woods, lived there his whole life, basically.
Right.
His story starts in this old inherited brick house. It's in a very woodsy neighborhood, bordering a massive, largely unexplored forest on, like, two sides.
So he knows the area well.
Yeah, explored these woods since he was a kid, so, you know, he knew this environment. What strikes you about that initial comfort? How does that maybe set the stage?
Well, that familiarity, you know, it can create this profound sense of maybe false security. When you grow up somewhere, you feel like you own it, you understand its rhythms and sounds.
Sure.
But the wilderness, it operates by its own rules. And sometimes it might have its own residents, let's say, who just don't conform to any expectations.
Okay.
So that contrast between his perceived safety and the sudden jarring reality that follows, it makes everything feel even more impactful, you know.
That makes perfect sense. So the first ominous sign, this was back in winter, maybe 2012 or 2013.
Okay.
One Sunday morning, he's heading out, there's snow everywhere, and he notices something by his pickup truck. A clear trail of, get this, barefoot footprint.
Barefoot, in the snow.
Yeah, and here's the baffling part. They led directly from the woods right up to the driver's side door, then immediately turned around and headed straight back into the trees. Vanished.
Wow. Okay, just that specific path, nothing else.
No other tracks, no approach to the house itself, just this bizarre direct route to the truck and back. What's immediately unsettling about that detail?
Well, the precision of it, right? It feels deliberate,
Yeah.
almost.
Surgical.
Not like someone just wandering around lost
Right.
and being barefoot in freezing temperatures with no other disturbance. It just screams that something is deeply, profoundly wrong. It defies logic, defies normal human behavior.
Okay, so fast forward a few years, winter 2015. This time, it's not just one trail. The entire yard was covered in barefoot footprints.
A whole yard.
Everywhere. In the driveway, near all the windows, all around the perimeter of the house. His girlfriend actually was the one who first pointed out, hey, look, there are no shoe marks anywhere. Confirmed they were all barefoot.
That's a huge escalation. It goes from one weird, maybe isolated incident to, well, a widespread, undeniable invasion of their space. The sheer boldness of it, covering the whole property. It's not just an oddity anymore. It's an inescapable presence.
And you mentioned his father earlier. He asked his dad, who'd lived there for years.
Right.
Dad had never seen anything like it, ever. Which just underlines how unique and, like, targeted this felt to them.
Yeah, definitely targeted.
No.
So what did they do?
Well, after talking to his dad and getting no answers, he grabbed his rifle
Okay.
and followed the prints deep into the woods. But then, maybe after just 30 minutes or so, the trail did something really bizarre.
What happened?
It split into two diverging paths.
Two paths.
Yeah.
Like from one set of prints.
Yeah. He didn't know which one to follow or how that was even possible unless there was more than one person.
Or someone trying to confuse him deliberately.
Exactly. Or maybe both. It was starting to get dark, so he felt, deeply shaken and decided to turn back.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Did they call the police then?
They did call the police that night, yeah. But, without clear evidence of a crime like a break-in or something, the authorities basically said there wasn't much they could do.
Right, which is tough. That split in the trail, though, that's a real game changer. It shatters any idea of just one, maybe confused person. It introduces this chilling possibility of multiple entities maybe working together and, crucially, knowing they're being tracked.
Yeah.
That's sophisticated evasion.
Yeah.
And the police response, while, understandable by their rules, it just highlights how limited conventional systems are when facing something so unconventional.
Totally. And then less than a year ago from when he told the story, it happened again. January.
Oh, no.
Footprints reappeared, but this time it was the worst yet. They led directly to a shed.
Okay.
And several tools were confirmed missing.
So now there's theft. Tangible interaction.
Exactly. His fiancée was, understandably, absolutely terrified. So this time he was determined. He called his friend Theo.
Theo.
Yeah, an experienced hunter. And Theo had this high-tech thermal scope for his, I think it was an AR platform rifle.
Okay, so bringing in the big guns, literally,
yeah.
And thermal imaging. That's a big step up.
Yeah, they were serious this time, trying to get answers.
It represents that shift, right?
Right.
From just being bewildered to actively seeking clarity with advanced tools. A desperate attempt, really.
So they followed the footprints deep into the woods again, but they kept hitting these dead ends.
Dead ends.
Ow. Like the trail would just abruptly stop. They'd have to backtrack, try to pick it up again. Theo apparently said whoever left the tracks really didn't want to be followed.
Suggesting they knew how to cover their tracks, maybe even walking backward perfectly.
Seems like it. It indicated this remarkable, almost impossible way of moving without disturbing the snow behind them.
Wow.
So darkness starts falling. Theo uses his thermal scope, and then he just freezes.
No.
He hands the scope to the narrator. And through that thermal scope, what did he see? Can you describe that image from the story?
Yeah, it's the moment everything just crystallizes into pure horror. What they saw were 4 figures huddled together in the snow. 4. 2 large, 2 smaller, appearing human, but hunched over, naked in the freezing cold, wildly jerking their heads around and visibly eating something.
Eating, like animals.
The description suggests this utterly feral existence, completely detached from anything we'd recognize as, modern humanity.
Oh, God.
And then the figures apparently picked up the 2 smaller ones and just disappeared deeper into the woods.
Yeah.
It makes you question, are these really human? Or maybe something else entirely, something adapted to survive out there in this unseen, untamed way, with this almost preternatural ability to just vanish.
They were both, as you can imagine, profoundly shaken.
I bet.
Police searched the next morning, but, the tracks were partly covered by then, and all they really had was the missing tools. They called it off pretty quickly.
Right. Not much to go on officially.
So the narrator and his fiancée, they're seriously considering moving. They're haunted by the thought of these people, whatever they are, returning, and they still have no idea why their house specifically was targeted.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What could possibly be living just beyond your own fence line?
It really does. This isn't just about losing some tools. It's about that fundamental erosion of sanctuary,
Exactly.
Yeah.
The wilderness isn't just out there anymore. It's infiltrated the home.
Yeah.
It forces that primal question. If your own backyard isn't safe, where is it?
Yeah.
It leaves you with that lingering fear that what they saw isn't just some weird anomaly, but maybe a hidden population operating completely outside society's rules.
A terrifying thought. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From that backyard terror to a more isolated frontier.
Okay.
Our second narrator, he loves solo hiking. He was on a multi-day trip, a major section of the Pacific Crest Trail, the PCT.
The PCT.
Yeah.
Famous, but parts are incredibly remote.
Right. And his habit was actually to venture a little off-trail to pitch his tent. For extra solitude, avoid running into other hikers.
Which immediately highlights that classic paradox, right?
Yeah.
You seek ultimate solitude. But in doing so, you potentially expose yourself to greater unmonitored risk. Out on the PCT, you can be hundreds of miles from help. Amplifies every vulnerability.
He definitely learned the true meaning of that vulnerability. On his 3rd night out, he woke up with this inexplicable sense that something was deeply wrong, just a gut feeling. Then he discovered his wallet cache, credit cards, personal info was missing from inside his tent.
Inside the tent, while he was sleeping.
Apparently. And what's even stranger, over the next few days, other small, random things started disappearing.
Like what?
A lighter, his Swiss Army knife, some energy bars. What do those smaller random thefts tell you? It seems so petty almost.
The wallet is a direct violation, sure. But the disappearance of small random items, that feels far more insidious.
How so?
It's like deliberate psychological torment, a clear message. Someone isn't just present, they're watching you, playing some cruel game. And the fact that his rifle, a critical survival tool, wasn't stolen, that implies a calculated choice, maybe to keep the fear going, or to disarm him slowly, mentally, rather than physically taking the weapon right away.
And compounding all this, remember, there was no cell coverage out there. He was effectively trapped.
Completely isolated.
The psychological toll started mounting fast. He described this constant awareness of being followed in total solitude, leading to this intense, perpetual anxiety he'd never felt before.
Yeah, that constant vigilance must be exhausting.
And his mind started playing tricks, rustling in bushes that turned out to be nothing, vanishing shadows in his peripheral vision.
Classic signs of extreme stress and paranoia kicking in.
But the most unsettling, he described feeling an ankle-deep puddle splash, feeling cold water soaks his sock, but looking down and the ground was completely dry.
Wow. A tactile hallucination.
Yeah.
That's intense. This story really shows how extreme isolation combined with a persistent unseen threat. It doesn't just challenge your physical survival, it can push your sanity right to the edge.
Yeah.
The stalker almost becomes secondary to the mind's own terrifying descent. Your brain, starved at external validation and just overwhelmed by fear, starts generating its own scary reality.
The anxiety was relentless. Even though he started tying his tent zipper shut from the inside, sleeping, basically clutching his rifle.
Didn't help the feeling, though?
No. One night, he woke up to the distinct sound of footsteps circling his campsite.
Oh, terrifying.
He said he was just paralyzed by fear, couldn't move. After that, he couldn't bear another night. He decided he had to push through the remaining day and a quarter's hike to his car, hike through the night.
Wow, okay. Hiking out in the dark on the PCT, that's a huge risk in itself.
Absolutely. But he felt he had no choice. So while he's hiking in complete blackout conditions, he hears footsteps behind him.
No.
He spins around, flicks on his flashlight, and catches just a glimpse of something slink behind a tree.
Okay, so this is it, the confrontation. Yeah. This is where the unseen threat becomes terrifyingly real. That decision to hike through the night, pushing physical and mental limits, it's pure desperation.
And the reveal. It was horrifying. A figure stepped out from behind the tree, described as barbaric looking.
Barbaric.
Humanoid, but naked, except for the hiker's own missing shorts.
No way. Wearing his shorts?
Yeah. The figure apparently had scratched up skin, face covered in hair, and it just started walking towards him.
Even with the rifle aimed?
Even with the rifle aimed right at it. He yelled, "Nothing!" So he fired a warning round into the air. The figure instantly just bolted, sprinting back into the woods, disappearing into the darkness.
Wow.
He didn't wait around. He ran until he finally reached his car, called the police. They basically just advised him to leave the area immediately.
Understandable advice. What stayed with him most?
He said the vivid hallucinations were actually the craziest part, but he strongly advises anyone on the PCT to be cautious, carry a firearm, and he said it will be a long, long time before he hikes alone again.
I don't blame him. Those details of the figure, barbaric, naked but for the stolen shorts, the scratched skin, hairy face. Yeah. It paints this chilling picture, doesn't it? Someone living completely outside society. A true wild man figure thriving beyond the edges.
Yeah.
And that warning shot being the thing that finally scared it off.
Yeah.
It confirms the threat was real, physical, not just his paranoia. This story really makes you question the true extent of wildness, not just in nature, but maybe in human behavior when it's totally unconstrained.
It definitely makes you wonder what could lead someone to that kind of existence. Let's turn to our third story now. This one was recounted by someone about his friend's father.
Okay.
The father was a tree saw operator, worked with a coworker named Griffin. They worked these grueling, often solitary hours at an extremely remote logging site, way up high on a mountain in the Pacific Northwest, practically inaccessible.
That level of remoteness is key, isn't it? This isn't just a hiking trail. It's an industrial site, implies machinery, some organization, but it's so isolated, maybe takes weeks just to clear a road to get there. That creates this perfect, unmonitored environment for strange things to happen. A place where normal rules just might not apply.
And things definitely got strange. It started with their radios.
Ah, radios again.
Yeah, they started hearing these faint, muffled, static-heavy murmurs. But the truly weird part, the chatter followed them when they switched channels.
That shouldn't happen. Not with standard radio.
Right. Impossible. As they moved deeper into the logging area, the voices became more distinct. Still unintelligible content, mostly, but the narrator described the tone as unnervingly casual.
Casual. That's creepy. The radio anomaly itself is deeply unsettling because it defies physics. Suggests some kind of tech manipulation or maybe a non-standard frequency. Someone's sophisticated or at least highly adapted. And that casual tone of voices you can't understand, it creates this profound unease, like someone's just going about their daily life, completely unconcerned, in a place where nobody should be.
And it wasn't just the radios. They started finding physical signs.
Like what?
Disconcerting stuff. Random containers left around, unexplained footprints in the dirt, small makeshift-looking campsites in this really desolate area.
Okay, so again, that progression from subtle weird signs to undeniable physical evidence, clear patterns suggesting a sustained, maybe organized presence.
And then Griffin, the coworker, found something specific, a hidden tent just off a trail they used.
The turning point, where the abstract threat becomes concrete. What was inside?
This is where it gets truly horrifying. Inside, just a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag. And the contents of that duffel bag, deeply disturbing.
Okay.
Multiple pairs of children's underwear, duct tape, rope, crude hand-drawn sketches of children being molested, and a photo of a fresh apple.
Oh my God. A fresh apple, meaning someone was there very, very recently.
Exactly. Recent presence confirmed. Christian, understandably, wanted to pack up and leave immediately, right then.
You'd think.
But the father, described as a workaholic, he insisted they finish the job first. She only agreed to limit their radio use to emergencies. It's hard to process staying after finding that.
It really is. This is the darkest turn. Those items, they paint this horrifying picture of a truly sinister, predatory presence right there with them.
Yeah.
And the father's insistence on staying, driven by work ethic, it tragically overrides this incredibly real present danger. It raises that question, doesn't it? At what point does our drive to finish a job blind us to instinct, to self-preservation? He prioritized the work over these undeniable, horrific warning signs.
That night, the radio crackled to life again. This time they heard clear snippets. Two men talking about mundane stuff like gathering firewood.
So they were listening.
Apparently. The father, he finally lost it, grabbed the radio, demanded to know who they were, what they were doing there, and then just unnerving silence from the other end.
Chilling. That silence is almost worse than talking.
Then around midnight, Griffin wakes the father up, whispering, "Someone's outside the camper."
Oh, no.
The father reaches for his gun, discovers it's unloaded, and he has no ammo with him in the camper. Griffin's unarmed.
Unloaded at that exact moment. That feels strategic, deliberate, leaving them utterly vulnerable.
That's what it felt like. Then they heard the camper door handle jiggle. The door actually creaked open even though it was high off the ground, no ladder nearby.
How is that possible?
They didn't know. And then they heard these long, deliberate scratches along the outside of the door.
Just pure psychological terror. Calculated, almost playful in the most horrifying way before the attack.
When the father finally worked up the nerve to check the door, it burst open.
Ambush.
Yeah. He was immediately struck across the face with a knife, went down. One man was on top of him with the knife. Another one started kicking him repeatedly while he was on the ground.
Vicious.
But Griffin showed incredible bravery, leapt out of his bunk, tackled the guy with the knife.
Wow. Good for Griffin.
As soon as Griffin intervened, both attackers immediately fled, just vanished back into the forest.
That's interesting. They fled rather than fight both of them. So just maybe they wanted a quick, terrifying strike, not a prolonged battle. Get in, inflict terror and pain, get out, back to the anonymity of the wild.
They managed to get out of there, drove 2 hours to the nearest hospital. The father's face was a bloody mess. The cut across his eye was so severe it caused permanent vision damage.
Terrible.
They reported the attack, of course, but the narrator said nothing came of it from the police. No leads, no suspects.
Again, that pattern, the legal wilderness, justice just vanishes in these remote zones.
And then the ultimate horror. 2 weeks later, the rest of the logging crew went back up to finish the job.
Oh, no.
And one of their coworkers was found dead in a ditch near the site, bound, gagged, raped, and murdered.
Jesus, better than.
No arrests were ever made for that either. The father, understandably, struggled badly with PTSD afterwards, his disfigured eye a constant reminder. And the narrator, his son, expressed this lasting fear of the deep woods because of what happened to his dad and his coworker.
That's the most tragic and disturbing end to any of these accounts. The lack of justice, the permanent injury, and then the brutal murder. It underscores this complete breakdown of any kind of civil order in these isolated spaces. These aren't just unsolved crimes. They're horrors that highlight this chilling absence of societal constraint. People operating with absolute impunity because there's literally no one there to hold them accountable. Crimes that just disappear into the vastness.
At third story, it really leaves you speechless, doesn't it? The brutality, the lack of any resolution. But as we look back now at these three distinct but equally disturbing accounts, you start to see these unsettling patterns emerge, right?
Exactly.
What common threads do you see woven through them? And what does it all ultimately mean for you, the listener, thinking about the wilderness?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? We see this chilling prevalence of mysterious, often unseen human or maybe human-like presences in these really remote, isolated natural environments. And these aren't just fleeting moments. There's often this clear progression of fear. It starts with subtle signs maybe, then escalates to direct confrontation. And the psychological toll is immense paranoia, vivid hallucinations, lasting trauma, even PTSD like in the last story.
And what's really striking, as we talked about, is that recurring theme of official authorities being, well, largely unable or unwilling to help.
Exactly. Whether it's because there's no traditional evidence, or the locations are just too remote, or maybe the accounts themselves sound too implausible. These experiences seem to fall right outside the conventional justice system.
Yeah.
And what's truly fascinating, or maybe terrifying, here's the implication. That some parts of the wilderness might actually harbor individuals, or maybe even groups, operating completely outside societal norms.
Like a hidden society.
Maybe. Or just individuals who've completely rejected it. And perhaps sometimes preying on those who accidentally venture into their domain. It forces us to consider that our sense of safety is really conditional. It erodes fast when those societal structures just aren't there.
So, connecting this to the bigger picture, these stories, they fundamentally challenge our perceptions of safety, of control, right? Even in places we think of as peaceful or just untamed nature. They raise these profound questions about what wildness truly means, not just in like trees and animals, but in human behavior when it's completely unconstrained. No laws, no social contracts holding it back.
Which brings up an important question for you listening. What kind of knowledge or what kind of preparedness is actually effective when you might face threats that just defy logical explanation, that defy conventional understanding?
Right.
These deep dives into the unknown, they force us to confront the profound vulnerability that comes with exploring truly isolated spaces.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, that sometimes the most profound horrors aren't ghosts or monsters, but rather a chilling reflection of what humanity itself is capable of when it's completely off the grid. So these accounts, they really leave us with this lingering question, don't they? Are these just isolated freak incidents, or do they maybe hint at something more? A hidden, unseen, human wilderness that thrives just beyond the reach of civilization.
Silently observing.
Yeah, silently observing, and sometimes maybe preying on those who dare to cross its invisible boundaries.
It truly makes you wonder what, or perhaps who, genuinely lurks in those quiet, undisturbed corners of our world, just waiting perhaps for someone to venture a little too far off the trail.